I'd like to go over some of the elements of art that we'll be talking about in the writing assignments. And I'll start with just two kind of main ones, line and color. Before I go into that, I want to briefly talk about captions and the kind of information that you'll get from a caption before you even dive into the image. So kind of the four main things: the gender of the artist and the location where they're from. So you'll see the artist's name, you'll see the year that it was made in, so you can think about the time in history, what was happening in the world. Then the medium, the material that it's made out of, so how something is made. And then lastly, size, so how small or large the actual object is. When you're seeing an image on a computer, they all look about the same size. So we can't tell if it's this kind of tiny thing right in front of us or if it's this huge monumental object on a wall that kind of becomes like an immersive piece of work. To start with medium, this is something that is most times obvious. When you see a painting, you can tell it's a painting, you can tell it's a sculpture, but it's complicated by when something is on the internet. So for instance, the image on the left, you might be able to tell that this is a painting, but it can easily be confused for a photograph if you are seeing it on a really small scale. On Instagram, for instance, you might think that that's a photograph initially. The image on the right, that is actually, it's a performance that happens in a gallery space. So unless you're actually there in person, and unless you're actually there, you can't tell that that's supposed to be the experience. When we're looking at it as a photograph, you can tell it's a mural, it's a drawing, there's something happening in the middle, but it's not quite clear. And then to kind of further emphasize that, even when you can tell that it is a painting, for instance, and a lot of what we're looking at are paintings, you'll want to ask yourself, well, what's the significance of this being a painting? Why did the artist make this a painting versus a drawing or a print or a photograph or a sculpture? There's some purpose that the artist wanted to get across through that medium. So you always want to kind of think about that. To talk a little bit more about medium, sometimes medium can be a little, it can kind of fool you depending on what it is. So this is an example of an artist, Alexa Mead, who makes images that look like they're paintings when in reality they are their real life. So these are real people that are sitting in a space, and she has just covered their face and bodies in paint. And so you're meant to actually experience this in person, but as we're all seeing everything on the internet these days, when you see this, you automatically assume it's a painting. When we think about size, obviously we have just the dimensions of an image. So you'll have something like 26 by 32 inches, which is kind of an arbitrary number. You'll want to think about the scale with the work, and the way that differs from size is that it's the relationship between things. So it can sometimes be the relationship between parts of an image. So maybe one part of the image is a lot bigger than another part. It's also the relationship between you as a viewer and the artwork. So sometimes, like I said earlier, something might be really tiny and you have to get all the way up close to it, and you have this very personal, intimate relationship. Other times, like this image, something is very big, and so you can see it from far away, but you can also walk up close and you just become surrounded by this image. Something else to think about is the relationship between the actual subject that they're depicting. So for instance, if it's a human, and then how big they've chosen to depict it. And so in this case, Jenny Saville is making these bodies larger than the real size of a body. And this is a very intentional decision. She's making these things sort of larger than life, literally larger than life. You can see her body next to them is significantly smaller, and she's not a very small woman, but she's purposely making these bodies bigger than they actually are. And so that's another significant aspect to what she's trying to say in this work. So what I like to do is when I see the size of an image, say it's 12 by 12, 12 by 12 inches, I kind of convert that in my head and say 1 by 1 feet. That's about this big. That's like about the size of my head. So it seems to be an image that's kind of meant to be viewed up close. This image looks like it's probably 10 by 10 feet. So that's 120 by 120 inches. So I just want you to kind of pay attention to the size and just try to like briefly think in your head, like how actually big would that be if I was in front of it? Because artworks are meant to be experienced in person, even though nowadays everything is through the internet. And then again, scale, in this case, Mona Lisa, because we know the Mona Lisa to be the most famous painting in the world, we assume it's going to be a huge painting, when in reality, it's a relatively modest size work. So now getting into a couple of elements here. And actually, right before that, I'm going to go through a couple more definitions to share with you. So 2D, 3D, 4D, kind of something to just think about as you approach a work. 2D is meaning 2 refers to 2 dimensions. So the 2 dimensions we're talking about are height and length. So anything that's flat, a drawing, a painting. Again, this refers to the medium and not the subject matter. So in the image on the right, Carrie James Marshall, you might think this is a 3D painting because there's a sense of space. You feel like there's a woman who's really sitting there. That is not what we're referring to. We're not referring to the sense of space in an image or how realistic something is. We're literally referring to just the material, the medium. Is this a flat work of art? So as much as we tend to kind of jump into a painting and say, there's a person, there's a room, you want to remember this is a work of art. It's an inanimate object. There's not really a person there. It's a representation of a person. It's a symbol of a person. So that's a really important part of art, that it's not real life. It's a symbol for something we sometimes do see in real life. Sometimes it's a symbol for something we do not see in real life. So the image on the left side, Twombly, you might think, just scribbles, doodles, just kind of like, writing in a text, in a book, the margins of a notebook, kind of doodling. So doesn't really refer to how we experience the world. I'll talk about that in a moment. So to talk a little bit further on this point of that idea, when we see this image on the right, we say it's 3D. What we're actually referring to is illusion. So illusion is the sense that there is a deep space in a flat surface. So again, this is a 2-dimensional work of art. This is a painting. It's completely flat, but it feels as though it's not flat. It feels like the space moves in, like you can move through the space, walk through the space. There's things that are overlapping. There's perspective. There's these kind of technical tricks that the artist has created to make you as the viewer feel part of this scenario. And you'll want to think about that as well. Why did the artist purposely create a sense of space? Why is the artist making me feel like I'm in this space, or making me kind of feel comfortable in this environment? Why are they doing that? We typically we do enjoy finding illusion in a work of art. We like that deep space. We like feeling like I can just walk into this image. It's creates a sense of fantasy, like you're in a new place. So this is all for a very specific reason. You'll want to think, why does the artist invite me into this space? Then three-dimensional, obviously 3D sculpture, installation. Yvette Mayorga, she's a Chicago-based Mexican artist. This is a work of art that's not only sculptures, but the whole room is the work of art. So you're invited to walk around the work, see the paintings on the wall, see the wallpaper, interact with the whole space, and you feel like you're in a completely immersive environment. And again, that is for a specific reason. Why did she do that? Why did she go through the trouble of painting the walls or putting in this pink floor? And then fourth dimension is time. So anything time-based, video, performance, other media. So again, if you're kind of looking at random works of art on the internet and you see something and you're not sure what it is, like for instance, if this image is really going to be confusing if you don't understand the context or what's happening. So if you were actually here and you saw the element of time unfolding, you would know that this is a performance where viewers are standing in line waiting to sit down with the artist and just to have a moment to stare at her. So now going into some other forms of art, there's three ways that you can categorize image-based art. So again, we're kind of talking about 2D works, photographs, paintings, drawings. I don't think we go too much into other forms because they're a little bit harder to talk about, especially when you're not there to look at them. But the most obvious one that we think of when we think of art is representational. You can also think of this as realistic art. It's representing something that we see in the world, or it refers to how we experience the world. So, and I say this very loosely. So you might not experience these images in your life. What I'm referring to is the way that these are people sitting in a space. There's architecture, there's objects, there's an accurate sense of light and dark. So in a photograph, that's pretty easy to do. You just take the picture. In a painting, you can imagine the artist has to carefully render these details. Where the highlights are, where the shadows are, you want to get an accurate sense of form, of proportion, all those things, color. The next two, there is some confusion between them. We typically think of two forms of art, so representational and then abstract. But I can go one step further and say that there is this form non-objective. So this is kind of the exact opposite of representational. This is non-representational, non-objective. So this is making no reference to how we experience the world. This is not about getting accurate proportions, accurate highlights and shadows, anything like that. It's not making people look like nicely modeled with soft skin and like drapery, looking like there's highlights and shadows. It's none of that. It's mostly just about color, shape, line, form, without that sense of illusion. So no illusion at all in these two works of art. And then abstract is the right in between the two. So it makes some reference to what we see in the world. It has nameable objects or nameable subjects, like a woman on the left, a man on the right, but it distorts or obstructs them in such a way that it's removed from how we actually experience those subjects. Again, the accuracy, the sense of accuracy might be distorted. The artist has taken a lot of liberties in their use of color, their use of brushstrokes, proportion, all these things, space. Space is usually flattened. So typically there's not a lot of sense of illusion in these works too, but they have those nameable subjects. And so again, these three forms, abstract, non-objective, and representational, you'll want to think, why did the artist choose this form for their idea? Why did they want us to see two kids in a stroller? Like, what was the point of that? What are they trying to say? Why did this artist choose all these red squares? How was this form, this non-objective form, conducive to his message? And same with abstract. Why did the artist make some reference to the body, but then change all the colors and shapes and forms, and not carefully paint the eye? A little further explanation on the difference between representational and abstract. You'll notice the image on the left. These captions are actually supposed to be flipped. So this is the Jenny Saville on the left, and then Tracy Emin on the right. The one on the left has careful light and dark, careful modeling. There's that softness of the skin, proportions. She feels like she's really laying down in space. Whereas the one on the right is more like a sketch. It's more about being kind of quick. There's a sense of urgency, expression. This would be called a gesture line. So it's about kind of the gesture and that quick act of just getting something down, not so much the technical proficiency that comes with the image on the left, or trying to really make you feel like you're seeing this pregnant woman kind of in somewhat of an uncomfortable position. It elicits some sense of compassion or intimacy, whereas the image on the right elicits more a sense of speed, urgency, maybe some sense of pleasure or immediacy, kind of like instant gratification, just to get this thing down. Even the process, you can think about the process with the one on the right, so quick. The process of drawing the image on the left is going to take more time, much more labor intensive. It's going to be more delayed gratification when you're making this work. And then one more image, cows on the left, cow on the right. Cows on the left, they have that sense of light. There's a light source from the above. The cow on the right, things are much more flattened, less of sense of illusion. So even though we're looking at two images of cows, they're communicating very, very differently. Okay, so I'd like to talk about line and color. So when we talk about line, there's a number of different lines, and I want to kind of talk about the significance of them. So obviously vertical line, we know what this is. It's a line that goes up and down, but you'll want to think about some of the connotations of this. And so this is something I actually found online, that the vertical line signifies ideas of strength, power, order, the connection between religion and spirituality. You can, in this case, the lines represent people, and so there's something to be said about body language. When you stand up, you're showing a sense of respect. There's also kind of a sense of control, maybe power, like power is here, but there's a sense of power here to these figures. Very different than when you're laying down, right? That kind of, it has a connotation being very calm. I'll talk about that in a moment. Also, I think in this case, there's a sense of authority standing up. Again, the vertical line, there's this kind of like maybe majesty, power, definitely powerful in this case. So to contrast that, the horizontal line or the horizon, you can think of being on the beach and just seeing that nice horizon line and how calm it is and soothing. In this case, the horizontal line again is calming. It's the body at rest or the body sleeping. So it's not active. It's more passive, reclining, softer, maybe submissive. We often see female nudes in a reclining position. So even this connection maybe to sexuality. And then the diagonal line is, you can think of the Nike swoosh. It's connected to action, movement. And so now thinking about geometric lines, these are lines that are man-made. We find them in architecture, in built machines, electronics, built man-made things. There's, compared to organic lines, there's more of a kind of masculine quality. They're strong, they're mathematical, they're rigid, hard, kind of definite, defined. This is a great image of, I think his name is Andrei Gorsky, forgetting his name, the artist's name here. I didn't add it in, but just showing the kind of geometry found in a store, consumerism, packaging, shelves, architecture. We're kind of surrounded by these things. Maybe we're not aware of it. They all sort of, it's like a puzzle piece, like Tetris. It all fits neatly together. And then on the other side, organic lines. So there's a softness connected to nature, living things, natural things, things that are alive and die. Also connected to, I would say, femininity. Maybe like there's an irregularity. Unlike geometric lines that are so regular, so rigid, mathematical. This is the kind of line that we typically see in images. They're implied lines. So they're lines that are not exactly there, but are made through other forms in the image. And so you'll want to think about this as a form of as a way that artists use, as a way that artists create compositions, meaning the way that an artist takes your eye through a space. This is a great example because you're really kind of taken in this like circular motion through the arm, through the head, down the other arm, then at an angle, and then up through the box, and then back through that arm into the head. So your eye sort of moves in the circular path. So if we just have a look at this image, there's a number of different implied lines that are happening here. And there's all of the ones that I just mentioned. So if we just start with the most basic, well, so every line here would be an implied line, meaning there, of course, you'll see some lines that are just regular kind of typical lines you might think of, but there's a lot of forms here that symbolize lines in the composition. So first ones I can think of are the pillars in the back. They're these kind of strong, vertical, geometric pillars that form the architecture of the scene. So they symbolize the strength and power on the background. Then we can look at the figures. There's this group of men on the left side, group of women on the right side. Very different body language. The men feel very geometric. The women feel very organic. The men are all, so there's the arms that are at these kind of horizontal lines. Then we have the legs at these angles. Then the swords also kind of at an angle. So these are creating this image of strength, power, and also action. And so they're engaging in some kind of oath or fight, or this is called Oath of the Horatii by Jacques-Louis David. And then we see the women are all in these very like languid, curved, passive, mourning body language poses. A couple other lines, the psychic line, it's a line that's not actually there but appears to be there, often created through the eyes, or I'm sorry, the gaze. So where the eye is looking. So if you looked at just this image without my red line there, you would naturally take your eye to that window because the woman is looking there. And this doesn't have to be created by a person looking. This could happen in other ways. A contour line, this is, if any of you draw, typically most people start out drawing with only contour lines. So it's the lines, also known as outlines, that separate two forms. And then a gesture line, this is a kind of line that is kind of like a scribble. It is evidence of the artist's hand. You can also think of so like when you can see the paint brushes, paint strokes in an image, like the one on the left, you can see evidence of the artist's hand. So again, it's this feeling of like it's kind of impulsive, it's fast, it's immediate, it's instant. They're not trying to hide anything. It's very revealing, kind of raw. And then talk a little bit more about movement and composition. If you think about all of these people and objects and all the implied lines in this image, there's a lot of action happening. All these things are kind of stacked on top of each other. They kind of all like move up to this one figure at the top with the flag. Then they come across. There's this the rope of the boat, of the broken boat. It appears to be kind of decomposing. Kind of goes down this wooden bar and then across again, but lots of shifts in between. So your eye does kind of move slowly within the space of the figures, as there's so many moments to catch. In comparison to that one, this is a little bit more of a free-flowing sense of movement. And again, this is line, another example of line, of how line kind of moves through the space, like the overall like gesture of the movement of the image. And then to talk about color, we'll think about the color wheel and color theory, which is the way that colors affect our vision, affect how we understand depth. the way colors work together has an emotional impact on us and has a connection between, they have connections between each other, and I'll kind of talk about that. But I show this example because colors, we categorize colors into red, green, blue, when in reality, it's this huge spectrum. And sometimes it's hard to colors are very much influenced by what's next to them. So if you have red next to a lot of green, that red might look different than if it was next to orange. So I guess that's all I'll kind of say with that. If we look at this image, we'll notice these are all fast food logos, fast food companies. They all share some colors in common. You might notice there's a lot of red, orange, yellow, pink, purple. These are all colors on the warm side of the color wheel. So red, yellow, and orange are warm colors. There's a very specific reason that these companies choose these colors. They're connected to appetite, obviously, as you might imagine. They're connected to speed, impulse buying. Red is known to increase your heart rate, maybe make you a little bit more impulsive. So there's a psychology to colors. They affect us on a very emotional, like physiological level. These companies, by contrast, are more on the cooler side of the color wheel. So a lot of blue, which is a color that makes you feel a little bit more calm compared to red. I would also connect it more with like the rational mind than with emotion. So red, orange, yellow, more connected to the visceral body, and blue is connected more to emotion, not emotion, to the intellect, the brain. You can also think of notions of trust, loyalty, all the things you want to feel when you're putting your money with a bank. And so this is, I try to sort of put color in the most general, basic sense. Obviously, in a painting, it's so much more complex, but you'll want to think about some of the connotations of colors. And there's a lot, red is also connected to just strong emotion. So it can mean love, it can mean anger, aggression, hate, it can mean love and hate, right? So you're gonna have to look at the image and interpret which one is it. Any kind of tension, even maybe embarrassment or shame. So very strong, like deep emotions. When we look at colors together in an image, warm colors typically move forward and cool colors will move back. This is an okay example of that, but I have some others I'll show you. In this case, the yellow boat, it's in the foreground, the blue water is in the background. There's like purple and green back there. Those colors, it's meant to create, again, a sense of an illusion, a sense of deep space, sense of perspective in a 2D work of art, painting. Again, yellow, orange coming forward, and then this like whitish, gray, blue, green, purple moving back. Kind of the same thing here. This is a great example. This one, the red really pops forward, and then this like grayish green moves backward. This is also an example of saturation. So saturation, like brightness, brighter things move forward, duller things move back. And that's also connected to how your eye sees things. There's like a filter where, or like a photo filter where you are looking at something and the subject gets really clear, everything else gets blurry. When things get blurry, the colors tend to get desaturated. So kind of like grayed out. So here's an example of that. So brighter, more saturation comes forward, duller things move back. And then a couple more examples, the pink and blue here, the pink contrasts that blue, kind of moves forward. Yellow and blue, or yellow and purple, the blue really moves back. So these artists are wrapping architecture in fabric, and so the colors they choose are really intentional to contrast that atmosphere around them. And then on a very gray New York day, similar to what we're having here, orange really contrasts that gray. It's a great example of that, playing with that relationship of saturation. And then another example, orange and blue. Another orange and blue. And so you can see how much clearer this the foreground is, the road, the mountains, and then in the back you'll notice things are getting more desaturated. So that's technically not even really because of your eye, but that's technically because there's more atmosphere, like there's more condensation, clouds and water vapors. And so they're in the atmosphere at a distance. And so they're making what you see appear duller because of the condensation in the air. Analogous colors. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about some color schemes. So how colors work when they're together. Analogous means side by side. So red and orange, orange, yellow, purple and blue. Here's some more examples. So these are colors that share something in common. So you'll know green has some yellow in it because green is made from blue and yellow. Red and orange is made by red and yellow, right? So these are colors that have similarities. When they're used together, they create a sense of unity and harmony because they're similar to each other. This is like yellow and green with the little purple in there. Van Gogh, yellow, orange, little green. Monet, this is on the cooler side, blue, purple, green. To contrast that, complementary colors are opposite each other. So they're the most different colors on the color wheel. So red and green, orange, blue, yellow, purple. Think of any sports team. Most of them, not all of them, will use this. The Bears are orange and yellow. The Lakers, purple and yellow. Mexico is red and green. So when these are used together, they create a lot of contrast and even tension, to the point where I sometimes feel like it's too dramatic, especially in this case, the red and green makes me kind of feel a little sick or a little queasy looking at this bar scene of people. Looks like people are starting to pass out from drinking too much. So kind of like that queasiness you feel from drinking too much. Maybe that's what Van Gogh was going for here. I think this, in this case, kind of works. Yellow and purple or orange and blue, kind of hard to tell. There's like a nice contrast and it's very, feels kind of like regal and kind of like works very beautiful, feels very elegant in this case. And maybe that's because it's used sparingly in this big scene of mostly like white and green. And then Van Gogh again, kind of a master colorist, orange and blue. Couple other color schemes, monochromatic, that's one color. So this again, because it's the other colors are similar to it. So if you're using, you know, dark blue, light blue, and regular blue, these are all, they have similarities. So again, they create harmony. They can create a sense of atmosphere. Jennifer Packer does this regularly. This is like an image all in this bright yellow. The figure becomes the environment. It's not separate. The figure is just part of that atmosphere. In this case too, the purple. It's like this, it's like condensation, like the figure is like breathing out and their breath is like becoming what's around them, or maybe the other way around, what's around them is like getting absorbed and digested into their system, and like they're just becoming one with the atmosphere and the environment. It's kind of like this spiritual, beautiful thing that we are one with what's around us. We're not separate. Monet, again, blues. So this is a way to talk about light, the way that light changes throughout the day, the way it reflects off of objects. Part of the day, it might feel like a very blue, cold light. These days, it's very gray, very sad. Kind of depends on the sun, how it's shining, the clouds, the atmosphere. Color is, how we experience color is connected to light, and light comes from the sun. So the way the sun shines, what's in the atmosphere is really going to depend on how we see color in spaces. Couple more here, achromatic. So this means no color. So speaking of light and color, achromatic means no color, and white, gray, and black are technically not colors. So even though you can go to the store and buy gray paint for your house, by the logic of physics, this is not, so white is the white in terms of light is all the light. So sometimes like a really bright light like the sun will appear white because it's like so much light. And then black is the absence of light, of no light. And then gray is something in between, some kind of diffusion of light. I don't know the physics of it, but I'll just tell you that based on physics, these are not colors. Even though there's paint in these colors, we're kind of talking about like paint and light. So we don't experience the world in an achromatic color scheme. We see things in color. The only times we do see black and white is in photography and cinema. So old cinema, old photography before they invented color was in black and white. I guess, like I've been saying, these days have been very gray outside. So when we go outside, sometimes it's very gray. So maybe we do experience some achromatic color schemes in the world, but they do have colors. They're just very muted. So if an artist is using an achromatic color scheme, there's a very specific reason for that. In the movie Pleasantville, all of the characters started out in black and white, and they eventually turned into color. So color was connected to this loss of innocence, when the characters experienced moments of emotion, of passion, sexuality, knowledge, power, violence, they went from black and white to being in color. So color is connected, again, emotion. So here we are kind of going back to the beginning as I started talking about it, emotion and life. Life is in color. So life, when this winter is over and spring starts to bloom, we're going to see more color, flowers, and you want to think of like fruits. When fruits are, ripen, they turn to color from green bananas to red. Life, like if, like women put colors on their faces to make ourselves look less gray. So, we want to look more alive. And then just a couple more primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, colors that cannot be made by mixing. So these are the purest forms of color. So you'll want to think about again, as usual, the connotation. In this case, the Madonna with the baby Jesus. There's a sense of purity, holiness. When we talk about secondary colors, it's the colors that are mixed. So when you mix the primary red and yellow, you get orange, red and blue, you get purple. That's some mixing. And then tertiary is like the orange, yellow, reddish, orange, purple, blue. More like how we actually see the world. We don't really see like pure color. Things are mixed. You'll want to think about the, again, kind of what those kind of colors convey. Less purity, more mixing, and less purity. And that is all that I have for you.